All right, it's recording.
So who do we have here? I mean, I see Naomi and I see Catherine. Oh, I got to see. I can see. Let me change my view here. I can only see 4 people at a time. So.
Oh, and I wonder who's getting the echo. I think if Naomi turns her microphone on, we're going to get echo because she's sitting like 4 feet from me.
She's muted.
Do you want me to mute me?
Maybe.
Maybe.
And then come off of mute, Catherine, when we're having conversation. And then we got V Lombardo.
That's Vanessa. Hi, Vanessa.
Vanessa.
Checking in. It looks like she's somewhere without voice because I don't see a microphone next to her.
She's mute.
But she's like, is she mute? Like, why can't I unmute her? I'm the leader of this. I should be able to unmute anybody. Vanessa has broken the system. Well done.
Am I supposed to be clicking on that bit.ly awesome?
I don't know. Yeah, well, you could.
Yeah. So, of course, this hour is your hour. It's a very informal time. I have a slide deck that kind of accompanies the whole thing, but it's not like we have to follow it. It's not like I had planned for this hour to go, okay, let me talk about slide 1. Let me talk about slide 2. It's more about having a conversation about stuff you read in the book, questions you might have, especially with these sorts of numbers. We can have a nice intimate conversation about, what you got out of it, or what challenged you, or what you didn't like about it. It can be whatever you want. I have the slide deck here. Like I said, it's a linear slide deck because that's how Google Slides runs. But I can jump around and pop the things if I need to. Or we can just play it by ear if that sounds okay to you.
Yeah, I vote for a play by ear until the ear doesn't work for us. Let's do it that way.
Yep, I'm good with that.
Is the URL working, and is the QR code working?
Is what?
The URL, the bit.ly awesome NJATS book study. Does that work?
I didn't click on it yet.
I clicked on the bit.ly and it worked, and I just opened the QR code and it looks like that's working too.
Great.
Coming up.
All right, hold on. I'm going to try and do that. Let me guess. It's your family.
That is my family. Because you already saw my Dan from Love It or List It joke.
So you're singing your whole repertoire right now?
I am pulling them all out. But this was, my wife made us go and do the family picture thing, and I was like, can we bring our D&D stuff? Can we make? She's like, we can get one picture like that. Like, okay. We actually got 2. There was one where we're actually holding other of them, but we had a great time. Okay, anyway, enough. These are the dates, right? These chats that we've got scheduled up. And just like in the live session with the keynote a few weeks ago, I feel like we're obligated to share. So again, anything here, feel free to share out. And then I didn't know if you wanted to have some sort of, like right now we're having a synchronous discussion. So, for this hour, this is what we've blocked out. But then we could always have an asynchronous discussion on top of that. So that could just be simply emails, and we just email back and forth. That seems to work. But then there are all these other tools that are, ongoing discussion tools. And I didn't know if you had one that you liked more than another. I just thought the people participating could kind of choose. I'm comfortable with any of these tools as a way to have ongoing discussion. But I didn't know if you had one, Thoughts?
I don't know what Slack is, and I don't know what River is, and I've never tried Flipgrid. So
I'm glad you're here, by the way.
Yeah.
It answers that question. I do lurk on Twitter. I do know what Google groups are. We don't have Microsoft Teams, so that's where I am.
Okay, so that's out. Let's cross that one off the list. How about Vanessa, Naomi? Do you guys have preferences?
Did they unmute? Option.
Well, okay.
Sorry, Chris. Naomi and I were trying to work out a I mute, she talks kind of thing, and it really fell apart. So,
Well, I'll tell you what is sort of, maybe we should just go with email and not spend too much time on it. If there's less a handful of us in here right now, maybe it'll grow as people participate. We can always just add to that email, or we can change if we need to. But does that sound like a good? Or
Email?
Mike?
yeah, I think that's perfect, Chris. Yeah, I think that works perfectly.
Okay, because I'd rather not people wrestle with a new tool and be, you know, like, well, what is this River thing? I don't know. And or it could be fun to try a new tool, but that's okay. Hey, who is that?
Kathy.
Oh, yeah, no, not at all. Okay, so today, I think some of the stuff maybe you've already read is the like-dislike activity. You remember that from, were you both there? Or, I mean, Catherine, I know you were there, but
Yeah, at the summit. It was, yeah, that was a great activity at the summit.
Vanessa, Naomi, were you there?
Yes. Hey, Naomi. Look, now Naomi and I are going to work it out over here. Naomi, why don't you just come sit over here by me, and then we can talk on the same microphone. Here we go. Now we're really having things happening now.
I don't want my voice recorded.
Sure. Really? You don't? All right, she doesn't want to be recorded. She's shaking her head and saying, yes, she was at the summit. Use the chat.
Well, let me ask. I mean, since you saw the activity and you saw that in the book, you know, there's a text version of that where I ask people who might not participate in something live to kind of go through that. What do you think of the activity? Does it, and I'll give you my impression at New Jersey. I already told Mike, it seemed to go longer than I've done in the past. For whatever reason, it happened that way in New Jersey. And people said things that I've never heard before in the New Jersey version.
We are
what,
unique.
what was your feedback about that activity, and what do you think about it?
You know, that activity was interesting, but I was looking at what you wrote in the book.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to sidetrack slightly.
Yeah, great.
The interesting thing that I really relate to is that nobody has anything nice to say about school. Like, where does school fall within that type of an activity? So what really struck me is when you wrote that if you ask a teacher, how are you doing today? That the answers are, well, it's almost Friday. We're just okay, or hanging in there. And nobody is ever like upbeat, happy, positive, but we expect our kids to be.
Yeah, so that resonated with you. You find that same when you're in your school, Catherine, that's the conversations you have?
Every day, you know, they'll ask me and I'll go, great, we're doing great. And they look at me like, really? They're not necessarily excited to be here. So if we're not excited, how do we excite children? How do we excite others?
Exactly.
That really, you know, I said, oh yeah, he's right on with that one. Because I see people every day, all the time in school. I say, how do you do it? Okay.
Do you feel like that's an activity that can be replicated? Meaning, you know, if you were ever asked to do a professional development. And the reason I start with that activity, and I started the book with it, is the idea that I like to think of professional development as like a 3-act play, you know, and the first, or like a movie or a story, that there's, you set up the problem, and then you have the plot in the middle about working towards a solution to the problem, and then the third act is a resolution to the problem. What are we going to do? But sometimes that can bum people out, you know, like
yeah.
let's set up and so I was hoping to set up the problem in the book that way,
Yeah. I don't know. That would be an interesting activity to do as part of one of our monthly staffing meetings. To do that at the beginning of a staffing meeting, or make that as part of a staffing meeting. So that would be an interesting thought. I have to think about that. We have a very, progressive, in tune principal. And if time allowed, I think that would be of value to
I think
our staff.
I would think so too, Kathy, for sure. I think that would really have some value. And it might get people talking who might not otherwise engage in one of those meetings.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, mostly we listen.
Yeah, right. And so, and how many times do we go to meetings and we mostly listen?
Right.
And so it would be just that in itself, that active engagement, it just changes it instantly before anybody even says or does anything.
Yeah.
I've been finding that staff meetings, and I'm actually surprised, Catherine, that this is not your experience, but maybe it is, that staff meetings have become more about, very similar to a project-based learning activity or a project-based learning lesson, where the first part of the staff meeting, there might be a few logistical administrative notes or something that the principal has to say, but then they do present some sort of problem or initiative, and they say, how are we going to make this happen? And then people break out into small groups and they work on something and they try and put something together, and they come back whole group and they share it. And I'm just curious, is that what you're finding in the schools as well?
We have done that, but not all the time. They're different depending on what the needs are, depending on if it's prior to major testing throughout the school, that becomes the entire staff meeting.
Yeah.
We have done a staff meeting on the nurtured heart approach. Again, totally different. We also did a staffing introducing mindfulness into the school. So it really varies. There isn't a set, this is what
format.
Yeah, that this is what we do. One staff meeting at the beginning of one year, we had teams. Everybody broke up into teams. You were told which team, and you were basically teamed with people you didn't know that well. And then we had to scavenger hunt throughout the entire school and then come back together.
Well, that's cool. That gets you to know each other and get you out of those.
And that was the purpose of it. And
Yeah.
that was the purpose of it. So, we do a lot of different things.
That's interesting, Kath. I think that you're probably an exception versus the rule a lot of times. I don't see those kinds of engaging activities or strategies at a lot of meetings that I pop in and out of. And again, as a consultant, you're kind of in and out of meetings, so you don't know the typical culture a lot of times anyway.
It's probably true. Like I said, we have a wonderful principal. I mean, we start out every meeting with kudos. Everybody giving kudos to whomever in the school for whatever reason. And that's looked on really favorably. And it's staff giving kudos to staff. It's not administration giving kudos to staff. It's staff recognizing other staff. From the custodian to the teachers to the specialist to the principal himself.
Ms. Luigi, please call 68. Thank you. Or Mr. Radeski. Thank you.
Speaking of him, yes.
Knew he wanted to participate in this web.
I like it.
Yeah, my wife works at a high school, and they have their mascot is the Vikings, right? And she came up with this idea of, she ordered like this felt Viking hat. And the idea is that it would be passed around from staff member to staff member. And each staff meeting, they would say, who's the valued Viking, And so it was this sort of a pay it forward sort of thing. When you were the valued Viking, the next staff meeting, you had to be thinking about, all right, who am I going to be caught being good, or who did something really exceptional? And I wonder if those conversations couldn't be fun to this sort of question, which is, you know, you said the teachers are coming to school and they're saying, oh man, is it Friday yet? And there's this kind of negative spirit around being there. And I wonder if kudos and valued Vikings and PBIS sort of initiatives, positive behavior intervention supports, can be used to kind of turn that, you know, move the needle in the direction of or turn that ship so that people are excited to be at work. You know what I mean? And excited to be there with do the thing they're supposed to be doing with teaching the kids, you know?
It is. We're also what we call a bucket filler school. So children, you know, there's a book on how to be a bucket filler, how you can fill someone's bucket by doing nice things and extra things, and how you can empty somebody's bucket by not being nice or not being kind. So we're a bucket filler school, and we catch students, and students actually catch staff being bucket fillers, and then you get to write this little bucket filler note, and they all go into this big bucket, and on a Friday, some names are pulled and they receive a little something for being bucket fillers. And it can be as simple as, you opened the door for me when I had my arms full of books, or oh golly, made me feel good when you told me I did a good job, you know, say it's to a staff person. But it, you know, that's kind of not, but again, it's the entire culture of our school.
Right,
and
right.
Again, that comes from the top, that comes from administration, that comes from our principal. And it must be very difficult if you have a more authoritarian type of administration. That doesn't necessarily help with the overall culture, I don't think.
Well, let me ask you this. First, I couldn't agree more. I mean, the more what'd you say? Why can't I say the word?
Authoritarian, yes.
Authoritarian. The more oppressive it feels, the worse it's going to be. So, but here's a question I wonder about the whole activity and this perception of school. Is that, or someone's job, really, right? Is it unique to the teaching profession, where people are like, oh, I'm just getting through, or is that how work is in general? And so this is just how we are in the United States. And we're just like, yep, kind of work sucks and you have to get through it, you know? I don't know. Do you think that this is unique to education or not?
I don't think so.
Yeah, I don't think so either. No, I think you're going to see this same thing anywhere. I think what's interesting sometimes is that in business, there's a lot of books and things like that related to how business can be better at bringing people together. And sometimes those business examples don't find their way to education. What's interesting, when I'm doing a lot of thinking and work with teams now, I'm reading fewer education books and more business books. They're talking about this idea of how to bring people together, how to get people to buy. We're talking about the same things, but there's just more of that, I think, in the business vein. And then you have to apply it to what we see in education, which really, quite honestly, is not that much different.
Sure. You know, Mike, I find myself, I'm curious if you do the same thing, you know, listening to podcasts, reading books, and trying to find sources that are outside of education, because a lot of the time when I do read educational stuff, it's a lot of the same stuff repackaged in just said in a different way, you know?
Yeah, without a doubt. Yeah. And so I agree. And so it's funny that you said that, because I subscribe to all these education podcasts and I find that I don't listen to them that often. But what I do listen to are these business kinds of podcasts about being creative and building teams and getting people to buy in, because I can apply that just as easily. And you're right. I think that it is a lot of the same things. It's kind of funny when somebody in education has something new that's out, or they are like the voice of the moment.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll see they will cycle through every, like you said, every podcast. And it's the same thing. And there's not much difference to what they're sharing. It's just they're sharing it on different channels of the same platform.
So maybe what I'm hearing is a couple strategies to answer this question. One is advocating for educators to look outside of the educational profession for ideas and for reinvigorating their own practices. And for changing their own mindset and building a culture around it. That's one. And then a very practical one is very positive behavior reinforcements for the staff so that when school doesn't feel like a drudgery, you know?
Right.
Does that sound like two ways to sum it up?
Yeah, I think so.
So then moving on to the next point, unless other people have comments, I was going to move on to the idea that what we're really focused about in the assistive technology world is disability. How does technology and how does education come together to help students, to teach when they have a disability, right? And I think about that like-dislike activity in the context that how much worse must it be to go to an environment where it's not designed for you, you know? And I use these examples, you saw me use these examples, and there's pictures in the book of just general ed kids, students who don't have disabilities, let alone if you do have a disability, what's that like for you? And I'm just curious if you find that as well, is that students with disabilities, they enjoy school even less, you know, and then more difficult for them. What's your take?
I have a side, again, a little side take to that. I still find that people consider technology as a last resort, that they need to do it, you know, the tried and true way, the way we've always done it. It always works great. If it doesn't work, eventually, okay, now we will recommend assistive technology. But we have students going into the 3rd grade, 4th grade, they don't read, they do comprehend, but technology hasn't been considered yet for them because they're still trying to get them to write. And it's frustrating, but they still view it as a crutch.
Yeah, it's funny you say that because before I was here, Mike knows I was driving from an event, a TextHelp had put on a little event. TextHelp, if you're not familiar, they do the read and write for Google Chrome. They do Ratio. We have other products. And they had a little event in DC. So I went to go see it. It was where they were showing product updates and, you know, kind of, I don't know, just a user group get together, right? And so there are people from Montgomery County. Linda Wilson was there. And some other people, we were all chatting, and Linda Wilson did have a 45-minute presentation she did, and those were the exact same words. And it's weird because she was saying that almost verbatim what you just said, how like she has to keep being the voice of text-to-speech. And she's like, 20 years. I've been talking about text-to-speech for 20 years, you know? She said, this slide that I have up here on Universal Design for Learning with this, she goes, I've been having this slide up here for 17 years. She's like, how can we make it different, you know? And what we landed on as a group, I think, in this, you know, side discussion, was that general ed has to own it. Somehow we have to teach general ed to own these strategies because it's still thought of, like you said, as a last resort, rather than baked into just how the design of the instruction, you know. And I'm just curious, how much, Naomi and Vanessa, do you work with students with disabilities?
Yes, Vanessa dropped off. Lauren dropped in, so we're back up to 5 people, but Lauren's now here. So hi, Lauren.
Hi, Lauren.
You can feel free to open up. Oh,
hi, guys. How are you?
Oh, yeah.
Good.
Lauren.
Hi, this is Lauren from Arlington Public Schools. So hi over there in Northern Virginia.
Arlington, like Arlington, Virginia?
Yeah.
No way.
Chris, I'll warn you, this
I
could
just
happen.
popped
Lauren
in.
could
I
be
was
the
in another
start of
meeting.
she could be the start because as we started, I tweeted out the link to the Zoom meeting and I said, if you're around and you want to join, join.
Oh, great, great. Lauren, you weren't at the text help thing, were you?
No, I wasn't.
No. Okay. Do you know what I'm talking about, though? The user group meeting that happened today?
Yes, I do, but I wasn't able to attend.
Gotcha. Gotcha. There wasn't anyone else from Arlington there, was there?
No, my colleague sometimes goes, and she wasn't able to make it today, and yeah,
Gotcha.
so
Gotcha.
we
Well,
missed out on
welcome.
the conversation though.
So Lauren, then do you you work in assistive technology in Arlington?
Yes, I'm an assistive technology specialist. We know each other from the AT coordinator group.
Oh, that's where I know you, Lauren.
I'm the
Okay.
one with the curly hair.
Yes, yes,
Yes,
yes, yes. Well, if the name, if I had seen your face, I'm sure I would have put it together.
that's okay. Yeah, and we have our upstate New York connection too. So
Yes, 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 yes. Well, welcome, Lauren. Um,
Thanks.
so how, I guess one of the questions that the book tries to pose is to talk about how we get general ed more involved, right? Like, even in my own neck of the woods, I work in assistive technology, which is under special education. We have an entire inclusion initiative, which is under special education, where it's all these special education supervisors and special ed teachers trying to increase inclusive practices. And it feels like all of that is misplaced in my mind, that it should be under the general ed camp, and that there should be, like I said, an inclusive design facilitator or accessible design facilitator, and that this is where the team should live. And I'm just curious what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I think, I think there's some like systems that make it separate. Like you were saying, that it's always been like a special ed initiative. And if it's not ever a gen ed initiative, then it's really hard to get any traction moving forward. One thing that we have here that I think is helping us a bit is a partnership with our tiered system of supports, because RTI is really general ed initiative here. And so we have a liaison and an office that we work closely with. And so we have a district subscription for things like text help. And it's been really helpful to partner with them to help disseminate information, to partner in trainings, because we're very siloed otherwise. And we kind of just, the people that are like registering for our trainings are only special ed people, and we weren't getting gen ed. So one thing we kept trying to reach out, and this year we have somebody who came to our training, and she's in our English learners office. Like, we used to be ESOL, but now it's called EL, in our EL office. And that's been really helpful. So then we started attending their meetings, and we started getting everybody registered for read and write, and we kept showing them some of the features, and we're like, this is so helpful. And so now that we're all part of one department, the Department of Teaching and Learning, both gen ed and special ed, it's breaking down some of those barriers, but it's very deep seated, that like, it's like, oh, that's special ed, so it's taking a long time to get to those general ed students.
So Lauren, a couple of clarifying questions here. When did the merge happen so that you're the Department of Teaching and Learning?
2 years ago.
Oh, gotcha. So yeah, that is still pretty fresh. And I can see, and you said something else, that RTI was brought about by your general ed department and is managed, because in our neck of the woods, we call it MTSS, right? Multi-tiered systems of support, and it's in the special ed side of things. So I'm curious about that. Can you talk more about it?
Sure. Well, it came out from our special education, our like student support specialists, which are special ed coordinators who lead our meetings, and it kind of came out of somebody's work there, and it sort of started that way. But then when it developed and it actually came to fruition, they kept saying, what are the reading interventions that all students get? These are the reading inventors. These are tier 1. Then what happens when they're not responding to those? Like, what other supports can we get? Oh, read and write, or whatever it is. And then we started kind of breaking down the barriers even between 1 and 2. like things that were tier 2 interventions, we said, why don't we move that? Why don't we get all those district licenses, you know, the district license, and make that tier 1? So we kind of like broke that down and said, oh, this would be really helpful. Why are we making access to, I don't know, Boardmaker Online and visual supports? Like, why is that tier 3? That should be tier 1 for anybody that needs that, you know? So we kind of started like pushing them down and saying, this should be available to everybody, and better communication about what is available. But a lot of what we do for assistive technology is connecting people to the resources that are out there and available at tier 1 and tier 2. And I'm like, this isn't a referral. Like, you just have to go back to what's available to all students. And they say, oh, we don't need you. Oh, this was so helpful. You know, so it's a process where systems change, though, so it takes a long time. So.
Well, yeah. So let me ask again. So when you say read and write moved from a tier 2 to a tier 1 support, is the funding following that? Meaning, so it doesn't come from special ed, it's general ed, and it's just available to anybody?
Well, to be really transparent, no. Previously, it had been supported from our tiered system of support and assistive technology, but our tiered system of support, this is totally transparent, lost some of the like funding for that. And then we said, this is still really important. So all the funding for the past 2 years has come out of assistive technology. Gotcha. We're hoping that we can move back to not just assistive technology buying the resource, but that we can split it 3 ways between the EL office, the tiered system of support office, and assistive technology, because then we feel like there will be buy-in if people are kind of doing that, and it would be more manageable for us, to be honest.
I have more in a couple schools that I work in, and we have exactly that, where it's not read and write, it's snap and read. So same idea. It's a tool across the board for everyone. And it started as a certain number of licenses for special ed. The value was demonstrated. We went back to IT and to the curriculum leaders and said, this is really important and here's why. And they realized that. And we have had for the past 2 years in this district a 3-way split for purchasing those things, which has been really exciting, because you're absolutely right. Then it got buy-in because everybody had a little skin in the game.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've so in our neck of the woods, we, just the quick story here is that we recognize exactly what you recognized. It started out with read and write for a handful of students, and years ago when we used that to say, we're going to provide this to everybody. It's just going to be a universal tool. And that was really even before we were thinking of things in categories like MTSS. Do you know what I mean? We had just said, we're going to make this universally available. We weren't thinking of it in tiers. And we've maintained it ever since. So it does come out of special ed budget. And every year we talk to our, general ed side, like, okay, this is really a productivity tool for anybody. It's just a literacy tool for anybody. And although the funding each year doesn't come, the dollars for the licenses doesn't come from general ed, most of the training does. So if you think of the hours that are being spent on implementation, that does come on that side. And if you think of those hours as money, you know what I mean? Time equals money. Then it's our I don't know if you call them TRTs, we call them IFTs, or your you know what I mean, in Arlington.
Tech support people.
Yeah, well, not support so much as the instructional coaches. You know what I mean?
Yes, we call them ITC. Yeah, they're in each school. Yes.
Yeah. So those people, and I don't know, Catherine, do you have someone like that too? Right? That's an instructional coach.
We don't. We don't have that at all. All we have is what they call an assistive technology team, and they basically fill technology requests for our students who have 504s or IEPs, individual education plans, and then somebody decides that that student would benefit from technology. But we don't provide technology, to my knowledge, for gen ed students. They have to be either classified as special education or have a 504 plan, and
Well-
then technology can be provided. But we don't have anybody who really demonstrates to all of the general education teachers the kinds of options that are out there. So,
Well, and let me clarify. Let me clarify, Catherine. Let's say you're just a general ed 4th grade teacher, and you want to do something with Flipgrid for all your kids. And is there some technology person that can help with that?
our media specialist would be the person that they would go to. So,
which is like the library media
yes,
specialist?
yes, but she's also the computer person.
Gotcha.
So if there are some websites of interest and those kinds of things, she would be the go-to person. But anything beyond, things like text to speech, speech to text, just like a step above that, I don't think we have it. And our technology team consists of 2 full-time people, 1 2 or 3 day a week speech person, 1 OT, 1 PT. Those are the 3 people. 1, what do you call them? Teacher of the deaf. And that's it. And that's for the entire school district of 14 schools plus all our out of district school placements. So
Catherine, can I ask, do you guys have one-to-one devices?
we do.
Okay, so one thing I'm wondering about is the built-in features. Like speech to text is built in on like almost every device. I wonder if it's just sort of a barrier to getting education about that, because that was another thing that we had done as part of this too, is look at like what features are built in that already come out of the box with your device.
Yep, that would be awesome.
Yeah, that tends to
Right now we don't have that.
Yeah, that tends to be a great path in, right? That's your entry point. And as I go in and out of schools, I see a lot of schools now in New Jersey starting to bring on tech coaches or elevate teachers to a tech coach position, even if it's part of the day and they only teach a certain number of classes, whatever it might be. And those are your early adopters, typically. The people that are not afraid of tech, they're comfortable doing it, they have the teaching background. They've become my entranceway where I want those people in on as much of what I'm doing as possible, because then I feel like getting them hooked on something that's AT that can be used across the board as a more UDL approach, or a tier 1 if we go with that route. If we can get them to understand its power, then they start pushing that out in every other interaction they have with teachers.
Yeah.
100%. That's what Mike, that's what I'm saying, that our tech coaches are the people that are doing more implementation of the AT.
Right.
Stuff that started out as tier 3 and has moved to be tier 1. Just a real quick practical story. I was just at a middle school doing a tour. I'm on the flexible learning spaces team, right? And we were looking at some classrooms that we designed. And so as a middle school, I don't get to go to all that often. And they had done the thing, a lot of schools do this, where they had put up signs outside their door that say like what book you're reading or stuff that can help you with or whatever, and it's something that's outside every single door. And outside our IFT, so our instructional facilitator for technology, or like Lauren said, the technology person, they had, I can help you with read and write for Google Chrome. Like that's what was written on this person's door. She's not a special ed person at all, right? Meaning she doesn't work exclusively in special ed.
Awesome.
Right? It's exactly, I saw it, I was like, yes,
That's awesome.
It's like a menu in a sense, you know what I mean? Like, what's the special of the day? Oh, it's read and write for Google.
Yes.
Flipgrid. It gets people, because sometimes when people are not techie, and we all know this, when they're not techie, they don't know what they even want to try to implement, because they're so afraid of being.
They don't know what's out there.
Yeah, they're afraid of.
Yeah, and this is like when you get the shot in the dark too, or they say something really specific, like I want this product, right? Like they say a product name rather than like a feature, because they don't know. They say like, I want snap type And I'm like, oh, but you already have that with Snap and Read, or, you know, with these other resources, or Siri, or, you know, whatever else. And we already have those, and they're right there at your fingertips. They're built into the iPad that you have in our app catalog that's available to all students. Like,
Yeah.
sometimes
Did
it's
you
just
know we have this PDF reader? Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you're right. It's how often now are we just, it's about refocusing. It's like Lauren said, asking that one next question, the why. Yeah, SnapType is awesome. What are you thinking about? How are you planning to use that? And then you let them dig down a little bit to explain the feature that ultimately brought them to that. And then you instantly pounce and say, well, that's awesome. You know what? We have these other tools that are already available. And let me show them to you, because it does exactly the kinds of things you're looking for.
Well, so this might be a nice segue then to the next slide here, my next little question, because so Mike and I were recently presenting together in New Hampshire, and you know what I'm going to say, Mike? The feature that SnapType offers is to take a worksheet and make it a little bit more accessible, so you can type on it or talk into it, or, you know, just like the PDF reader. I think that's what we're talking about, right?
Yeah.
And so there's this section in the book where I wrote this thing called the Eulogy for Worksheets, right? And I mentioned it in this New Hampshire presentation that we were doing, where I was just not this eulogy I didn't mention, but the idea that so I will, and this is what I said during my presentation, is that I will show you all day long how to use the PDF reader or SnapType. You call me in for that, I will show it to you. But I feel like my job has shifted over the years, where once upon a time I would have just shown you that, and then I would have walked out. Okay, problem solved. But now I keep thinking about that like, dislike, and I keep thinking about how kids with disabilities, kids in general, but especially kids with disabilities, like, worksheets are boring and they're not fun, and you don't really remember anything, and you can spit it back out on the test, but then you don't, it's not deep learning, it's like shallow learning. And so I have sort of waged this war against worksheets, because I want people to be thinking about, how do I design, again, the educational experience, so you don't need the worksheet in the first place. You know, I want kids taking notes and using the PDF annotations on PDFs, because they're working towards some sort of bigger project. You know, I don't know. What were your thoughts when you read this? Where are your heads with this? Am I off base here? I can take it if you think I'm pushing it too hard.
You had a part in your book where some person was talking to the teacher and asking about the accommodations, and the teacher wasn't getting it, and the person's going, no, but they have an IEP. And if I remember correctly, at the very end, the teacher said, oh, that's because all the students in my class have access to everything, and they just choose what works for them. So whatever they need, they have.
Yes, true story, by the way. I just changed the name.
I thought that was awesome, because we don't. We teachers, you know, some teachers are more familiar with other means of presentations than some teachers, if that makes sense. But I just thought that was an extraordinary way of looking at it. If everybody could choose how they wanted to get the information, and you didn't have to be classified or have a 504 to have access to all of that stuff, how many more people would actually be using it? Because my guess is there are students out there that don't qualify for any type of special education or 504 that would learn better, perhaps with speech to text or
Well, I think we know that, Catherine. I think there's some statistics that back that up. So the decoding dyslexia, the people that work in decoding dyslexia like to tout the statistic of 1 in 5. 1 in 5 people have dyslexia, right, Mike? You've heard that?
Yep.
And so if that's true, let's just take that at face value, because there may be some, you know, discrepancy there. People might say, it's a little bit high, or I'm not sure about that. But let's just take that at face value, because if that's probably the least dangerous assumption, right? Is that, yeah, there's more people with dyslexia out there than we're currently measuring, right? And that's just dyslexia. And if you look at the average number of people or percentage of disabilities in any given school district, or really the country, you find that it usually floats between 11 and 13%, right? That's all disabilities are 11 and 13%. So how can it be that there's 20% of the population, 1 in 5 has dyslexia, but all of special ed is 11 and 13%. You know, there's something off there, which is why if you provide things universally, then you catch any limits in between and anyone you're missing that's not identified, you know.
Yeah, I always think this idea of, and when I talk with teachers and just in schools, even to students as I'm in there, in and out, you know, I try to drive this home with this idea of, you know, options. You know, we're talking UDL for a second, and it's just as simple as saying, you know, who likes to read audiobooks? Who likes to read a print book? Who likes to read a book on their iPad? Who likes to switch it up once in a while? And everybody will throw their hands up at different times. And I'm saying, congratulations, welcome to the world of options. You have options as you move through this. Why can't we provide those same options for everything else?
Yep.
Yeah. This is like a little soapbox of mine. I totally agree. And it just kills me when I go into a classroom, and I literally just today got an email about the same thing, that somebody was asking for, you know, something to make, you know, make a PDF accessible, make a worksheet accessible. And I'm like, why are we still talking about this? Like, so one thing, so I said, I can come in on Friday, you know, I said, when is your planning time? And I'm going to come see you on Friday. Like, let me just talk to you. And I'm just curious when I go in, it's fascinating to me. And this actually was an example from one of my colleagues, but she went into this classroom, I don't know, 4th or 5th grade, and there was something on ancient Greece. I forget what the curriculum is in our state that's like ancient Greece. It was a reproduced like 500 times a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy of this ancient Greece thing from 1998. And this was last year. I'm like, that is a 20-year-old 30-year-old resource. Like, it's just like, I can't even, I'm like, have you never seen any of the resources? Like how did you decide on this? And I thought the student that we were working with had a vision impairment, or my colleague was working with, and I was supporting her, had a vision impairment. And I said, but even me without any difficulty with vision, I can't see a reproduce. And I was like, this is just totally against copyright. I said, I can't make this accessible. I said, but what I can do is help you find other resources that cover the same thing. And then I said, I'm just curious, what would you want your students to do to show that they know this information? Like, in the perfect world, what would be like the most fun lesson that you would plan, or how would you want them to show you that they know this? And I think sometimes by making them advance their thinking a little bit, like push their thinking forward about, oh, well, I'd want them to, I don't know, sometimes they come up with a creative project or something like that. I'm like, then why are you doing it on a worksheet?
Exactly.
You know? Right. Yeah, and if at the very least,
we're going to be devil's advocate here. The
Okay.
reason a lot of teachers do that is because they are hammered with data, graphs, percentages, numbers, show progress, demonstrate, and that is really the easiest for them to demonstrate what has been taught, what it is. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, our teachers are required to demonstrate as part of their student growth objectives that their students are growing.
Right. And this sort of pushes the thinking forward to like empower learners to engage with the curriculum in a different way. So now teachers are tasked with making rubrics to look at individual project and things like that. And it's different. It's a totally different way of teaching and a different approach. And it's easy to go back to what we've always done because it's objective and we can kind of like, okay, you know, and I get it. Like, oh, okay, I can check off. Like, they got number 1, 3, and 5 correct, you know, but they missed 2, 4, and 6. Like, they only got 50% of this test. Like, I need to go back and reteach ancient Greece I don't know, something in ancient
Yeah.
Greece, Acropolis, right? So then they go back and they reteach that, and then they get the question right on the test. But if we're looking at having our students engage in learning in different ways, then the way that we assess students is totally different. And
Yeah.
it's very hard. It's hard because we're doing a new system. And I'm wondering, I don't know, it's sort of like a greater issue. How are we preparing students for the future? And in the future, we don't know what the jobs are going to be. You know,
Right.
we can predict some of them, but like, we don't know. But if we make good problem solvers and good engagers, we know that we're going to have adults that are engaged and learning on a different level. You know, if we teach problem solving. And so it's kind of, when students have choice in their activities and their problem solving, they're like engaged in a different way. But I totally agree. We have like an old way of measuring teachers and how the students are making progress. And then we have this new generation of teachers who want to do things like this, but they're saying, oh, but the system's kind of against me. I can't really do that very easily. Or I haven't developed that rubric and somebody just handed me this and it's just easier to do that. Or my evaluator, my supervisor, my principal, my administration doesn't think I should do this. So, because they went to school 40 years ago and I just got out of school or something. I don't know. It brings up a lot of like questions kind of about like, how are we teaching students and assessing their learning?
So I think there's well, again, maybe I'm oversimplifying things, but I think there's an easy strategy to help shift this. And that's simply, I do a lot of switching of words that we use. You know, I talk about teacher turning into an educational experience designer. And so another simple one there is, Catherine, you used the word data, and that teachers have to be data driven and that they are asked to collect a lot of data to prove a student is learning. And I just wonder if we could change that word from data to evidence. Because data means to most people, when I say data, or when you ask them what the next thing, or do a word association game, they'll say data means numbers, right? Mm-hmm. And numbers is certainly part of it, but and there are certain ways you can get metrics out of students, but out of students' performance and the work that they're performing when they're working in a project-based lesson or they're doing something more engaging, like Lauren is saying. So what if the teacher is not tasked to provide data necessarily, but to provide evidence? And data, quantitative data, could be one portion of that, but also could be work samples. So here was the beginning of the year when the kid did this, and here's the end of the year when the kid is doing that. This is evidence that they've shown growth and that they're learning. It could be as simple as, like, here's a comic strip from the beginning of the year. Note that the words that they used in the comic strip were, the sentences were, the average sentence length was 3 words, and they had 4 cells. And here, towards the end of the year, the average sentence length is 8 words or 6 words, and they've got 6 cells. You know, that is growth, you know. And I wonder if that would be another way to look at the growth, is to look at the work the student is doing and analyze that. And I'll throw one other thing in there, coming out of the text help thing. They always bring it back up every time I hang with those people and have a meeting with them. The idea that a lot of the data that we want from students doesn't have to be a go-get. It can be it's already there. Mm-hmm. Meaning, they use the analogy of the Fitbit, right? It's like, I don't have to keep track of my steps. I can just look at my Fitbit and I can know that, oh man, I did a lot of sitting today. You know, it's the data could be, the technology can help us collect the data and collect the evidence without us having to do a lot of the time spent on doing that on our own, if that makes sense.
Right. The legwork, without doing the legwork.
The legwork, yeah.
Mm.
I love the word evidence. I just feel like that changes sort of how people are thinking about it, because like you said, there's that association with like data, numbers, has to be quantitative, can't be qualitative, can't be a video of the student or the comic strip example. So I love evidence. I feel like maybe that's a new way. If we keep saying that, then people will, I don't know, change it up a little.
I
Maybe.
agree.
I just dropped something.
I love being able to talk about evidence. So much better than data.
Yeah, and I think it makes for a really great conversation with our teams is that, what does that word mean to you? Maybe that's the entrance point to this conversation with them. If I said to you evidence, what does that mean? Evidence of learning. That is much deeper, much deeper. There must be thousands of times that I've interacted with educators and they have had this kind of preconceived notion about what tech can do for a student. And they can only use a pen and a paper.
Yeah.
And then I have to constantly, and it's obnoxious at times, but why? The question is why all the time? Why? What are you trying to determine with this activity? This learning activity is leading to what? Then I can walk back and we can talk about some of these other things. I had this last week. I was working with a team and they're trying to get a student to type on a keyboard that's attached to his iPad. And he does not know the keyboard. And he has demonstrated a complete disinterest in learning the keyboard. But yet when he turns his iPad on, he hits that button for the microphone and he will give you exactly what it is you want.
Right.
And so the comment to the team was, what are we all doing here? What's our end goal?
Yeah.
If you wanted to show this demonstration of knowledge and expertise, congrats, he just did it.
Right.
I mean, we've done
So
it.
that our students are teaching us all
the
the time. I'm like, they figured it out. They already have strategies for this. Especially if you're getting a middle school or high school kid that really has dyslexia, they've already figured out a whole bunch of other strategies. They haven't been successful in school. I'm like, what works for you? What have you been doing all this time?
Hey,
They've
Lauren,
figured it out.
how many times do people not even ask those kids? They just restart the whole process again without even saying to that student, what are you doing now?
Yeah. And they ask the teachers. They never talk directly to the student. I'm like, these guys are really smart. They know.
Exactly. I've had students where, a teacher will say, this student is not very engaged in anything. So I don't know what you're going to get them to do. And as I talk to them for a couple minutes and I start digging into what they're about, I had one student who's like, this is not interesting to me what they're talking about. And if I'm interested, I will do it. And he said, in fact, I have my own YouTube channel and I review video games. And I went on his YouTube channel and he's got like a 40-minute dissertation off the cuff about a video game. So clearly he has interests and he's able to structure a conversation and some, and what would in essence be like a report about each video game. So why not let him use the dictation to do that?
Yes. Clearly he can compose.
Clearly he has good understanding.
No, it's because it's a crutch, they all have to do the same.
Exactly, right? Why would I allow him to do that? That's a crutch. Exactly. Yeah.
Crutch. But it's not only the educators sometimes who feel that way, it's the parents who feel that way too, which is another challenge. Like the parents will say, I want my child to be able to write. I want them to be able to do that. We can't make it easier for them because they're going to take the easy way out,
Yeah, I think a lot of times turning that back on parents as well and saying, how many times today did you write something down?
Right.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah, they've learned. A parent, think about it. They're, 20 to 40 years older than their kid. They learned in school in a different way. And when you're not in the field of education, you kind of just go back to your personal experience and you're like, well, that wasn't allowed when I was in school, so sometimes they're a little stuck because they haven't had the same experience or they're not seeing what else is going on in a classroom or in a school. So
And I turned out fine.
Right.
That's right. I wrote my homework for the board every day and I was fine. Yeah.
When you know better, you do better. When we have more, we expect more. Yeah.
All right. Well, it's 4:30, and so we should make some decisions about how we want to continue this conversation. Like I said, email is one option. Are there other options? Jennifer, hello, welcome.
Hi, Jen.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, glad you're here. there's a couple things we can do. Now, if we could easily start this as an email chain. We could start, and I could put these I could put a couple, Chris, maybe me and you can come up with a couple leading questions to keep the conversation rolling.
Okay.
I could drop it out to the entire list, even the people that couldn't join us right now at this time, to maybe keep the conversation going. We could
Great.
try it as an email list back and forth. I'm also up for other things. I don't want to get too intense with tech if we feel like that's going to scare people away. I don't know. We could pose a couple questions and put them on a Padlet and people could answer.
Maybe Padlet. That's pretty, let's do Padlet.
Okay, because then the questions can have their own column and people can just respond and just go right down the column and add their thoughts to what people have said.
Yes. Cool.
All right,
let's do that.
Yeah, let's try that. And then you know what? Next time we'll try something else.
Or we'll see how it works.
Yeah, exactly. So for everybody on right now, Chris and I will come up with a handful of kind of prompts to keep the conversation rolling. We'll throw it on a Padlet and I will email that out to everyone so that we have a next step as we go forward.
Sounds good.
Awesome.
Guys, this was great. Thank you so much. It was such a great conversation.
Yeah, this was fun. I really.
Wow, I feel like a small focus group. This is like amazing, you guys. Thanks.
Yeah,
I have my own little personal session here.
It's wonderful. And we recorded this and we'll throw it up online so people can see what we spoke about. And hopefully that will generate some excitement for people to join us if they can next time.
Wow, I didn't do the time zone switch. I just showed up. My apologies.
And I knew that was why you popped in and I started laughing when I saw your name pop up. And I said,
oh, man, I'm so mad I was available too.
Well, next time, if you look here, Jennifer, you can see these are the dates and the times are Eastern.
Jen,
My fault. I'll watch the video. Watch the video.
I was in my New Jersey state of mind, so I only went Eastern. I didn't even think to change it for anybody else.
No, I didn't even put ET on here.
Yeah, me neither. So.
We're so self-centric, guys.
I know. Because really, isn't it all about me most times? So that I apologize to everyone.
I was so proud of myself too, and I really am not.
Jen,
all right.
Next time for sure.
I'll see you in the Padlet and in November.
Sounds good. Thanks,
Bye.
everybody.
Thanks, guys.
Have a good night, everyone.
Thanks.
Look forward to recording.
You guys.
Thanks.
See ya.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Let's see. Stop recording.